Welcome to Gleaning and Gathering. I'm your host, Eric Heimlich, and today I am excited to bring you conversations that I had with some of my friends at Mode Camp. We just got back from fall retreat, and it was a delightful time, and just reminded me again of how much I love this place and love the people of this place. And so I want to share with you a few more of the conversations that I recorded there and hope that it is a blessing to you. I'm here today as well with Matt Thomas, and he is the, what is your title here? Executive Vice President?
Just Vice President.
Oh, just Vice President. Vice President of the Mode Camp Association. Matt, how many years have you been coming to Mode Camp?
I don't remember the first few times I've come. I believe my whole life. My family didn't usually stay here, but we would come up for an evening service or weekend service. And then as soon as I was old enough, I started staying in the dorm, and now I'm bringing my family, my boys,
wow,
here. So
it's probably been since you were a little boy then that you were here.
Right, 4.5 decades.
4.5 decades. Wow. Well, I was interviewing a few of the other people around campus this year, and I think Pastor Bailey came 50 years ago.
Yes.
And Brother Ryder was here 51 years ago. This is his 51st camp. And so there's a lot of people who've been here over the long haul. And that kind of longevity, obviously, really, those are the people who make the place. Who are some of those people that stand out in your memory as people that were just kind of icons of Mode Camp in the past?
Right.
That were memorable to you?
Well, I was just looking through a list. We have maybe a list of 200 names of people, kind of a memorial book. There were a lot of names there that I did not recognize at all, but there were some that have really had a big impact in my life. Some I would have known a little bit outside of the camp, but strictly for the ones that I met here at camp, immediately I think of 3 World War II veterans that they were all quiet men, but they were very faithful to the camp. They'd be here working. About 26 years ago, when we built the new girls' dorm, I was carrying sheets of plywood across the rafters with an 80-year-old gentleman, and he was right there every step of the way, walking the rafters, carrying his end of the plywood.
Wow.
And I just remember helping set the plywood in place, and I took too long, and I looked back, and he had already gone back, and he had the next sheet all by himself. He's just coming right across those rafters, just walking up there, and it just not to show off at all, but just he'd been working all his life, and that's just what had to be done. I remember Joe Horner. He had the bluest eyes, quiet, but just genuine, man. Edgar Tucker, soft-spoken. He did some preaching of services from time to time, and just, he was genuine. He really cared, and he talked to everybody like he cared about them. You could just tell.
Yeah.
Charles Simpkins, I did get to know a little bit better because he preached at my home church, and he did quite a bit of work around here. The thing of it is, I was thinking about it, they were working to get camp ready for that year, back in whatever year it was. They're up here working, but they were also getting camp ready so we could have it today. Mm-hmm. What they did, we're still building on that today, and it is inspiring that we can, the impact that we have can go well beyond what we see, what we even know as a possibility. We don't know who will be here in 20 years, and so we want to do our best to, it inspires me to do my best to leave things have things in a good shape and make it easy for them to carry on. So as far as what that has done for my life, Mode Camp was always a place for me as a kid that was something felt special. I compared it that it must be like heaven, kind of like heaven just a little bit. And it took me a while to figure out what was it about being here that felt like it must be a taste of heaven. I think being a family camp and being able to work beside people that were grandfather figures, grandmother figures, aunts, uncles, it was like a big family. And when you spend a week or 10 days, you're eating beside people, you're working beside people, you're playing beside people, you're going to services with people, you really get to see what kind of life they live. And that whole time then you're away from the news and you don't have to worry about what's going on in the world and all its craziness. It's really refreshing. And I'm really glad that my sons now get to experience that. It's a week of the year that then gives us a boost to be more Christ-like, hopefully, as we go back to the world. As I've heard people talk about Shakespeare having a lot of his stories had a place where characters would go to experience something, and that encounter would grow them, give them character arc, and then they would go back to real life. So, for instance, A Midsummer Night's Dream, the whole story pretty much takes place in the forest at night, but that's not where the characters live. That's just where that story happens, and that story, those events change their lives. I think, and we can see that in a lot of different stories, not just in Shakespeare, but to have a place that you come for a time and have experiences that challenge you and make you grow, you build relationship, and then you go back out more prepared to face life and face it as a different and better person. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, well, I think one of the things that has been special about Mode Camp is just the intentionality with which so many of those things are done here. And I know many camps have, things that make them special. But for us, I know the first year that I came and their memorial service was, for me as a newcomer, a strange thing. It was like, what is this? And yet, the longer I've been here, and the more I've known those people whose names we say during that memorial service, a reminder of the connection that we have to people that have been here before us, and that we are part of stewarding that and passing along a legacy to a future generation. Really, that's probably one of the times of the week that have become one of my favorite parts of Mode Camp.
Interesting, yeah.
Even though, at first I thought it was strange, as it's gone along, that connection and that visible reminder, as the young people are standing in front and these names are being read, that there's continuity here to something that's beyond just 2024. Here we are, we're doing this, and I think that's been a special thing. So I appreciate you mentioning these specific names of men who have made Mode Camp what it is. And I've got a special connection to Brother Simpkins. Brother Ryder told me a couple years ago, he said, you're staying in the cabin that used to be Brother Simpkins. And so I've been reminded of that, we're at least for now staying in cabin number 5. But there's been other folks who've been there before.
And a small benefit to you is he installed things in his cabin long before any of the other cabins had them. So he put some plumbing in that cabin, and you're benefiting from that today.
Yes.
Whereas there are a lot of cabins that still don't have that.
So true.
He was obviously working all over the campground, but then he took a little bit of time to fix that cabin up and do something to it, and here we are. You're still benefiting.
Still there. Yeah. Well, thanks for taking time, and I really appreciate you sharing your perspective of Mode Camp. Anything else in closing that you'd want to say about Mode Camp?
Well, I only started to list names. It's getting harder to add names now to the list. Last year, 2 years ago, I can't remember now, it became my duty to be in charge of the memorial service. And as I was looking over the list of names, there's, like I said, a lot early on that I don't recognize. A few, though. And then I get to the last 8 years, and there's some people that really impacted my life on a much deeper level. Deb Miller worked at the college that I went to. She'd been here as a youth worker for a year or two, and when I would be a college student and I would be down, I would go into her office and she would push her desk clear, and she would pray with me, talk, listen. It meant the world to a 20-year-old that didn't know up from down and was confused about life. So I know it's going to get harder and harder to add names. Felita Leibarger goes on the list this year, and she was a cook here at Mode Camp, and I grew up living in her neighborhood, and she was the kind of mom that every young boy wants to go over to her house. She would always have food and always insist that you eat some of it and then eat some more of it. And it gets harder and harder to write these names down. And, Alan Daniels. He wasn't involved with the camp for a long time at all. In fact, other than a few services, he only made it to a retreat. But at that retreat, I still see him playing tag with the kids. And I didn't know it at the time. He didn't know it at the time. But cancer was eating his body. He knew he had pain, and he was pushing through the pain. But he didn't know he only had a few months to live. But he was out there living it up, playing with the kids, bonding with the young people.
Yeah.
So
those are special memories of special people.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Mode Camp has been filled with those kind of people. I know from our short time here. We're like the new kids on the block, at 9 years. But it's great to have those kinds of memories. And I think it's wonderful that the camp continues to make those memories something that we treasure and cherish from year to year. I think it's important.
Again, it is a challenge for me. When I think of those people, I am challenged. What is my impact going to be? How will I be remembered?
Yeah. What kind of
what
legacy
am I leaving?
Legacy am I leaving? Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thanks again, Matt. Appreciate your time.
Appreciate you, brother.
Enjoy the rest of Mode Camp.
Thank you.
So we're here tonight with Bruce Fink. And Bruce, how long have you been coming to Mode Camp?
Since the summer of 1987.
1987. What was Mode Camp like back in 1987?
In some ways similar to now, and then there have been some big changes over the years. As a young person, I wasn't that involved in the camp. And in 87, I would have been 23 years old, so I was too old for the youth, and I didn't really fit in with youth. But the main reason I came was because I had friends that were similar age that invited me, and I was close and connected with those friends, and that was what got me to Mode Camp.
Wow. What are some of your earliest memories from Mode?
Really good food. Fantastic food. That stood out in my mind. And thinking a little bit deeper, there were people that loved Jesus, were completely surrendered to him, and I believed in their hearts. And I like to be around people like that.
Yeah. So further on, how did you end up staying at Mode Camp? What was the story there?
Again, because of the connections with my friends, and I have to admit, we weren't that involved with Mode Camp. I came up to some of the work days, or I'd stop by and participate in work days on my way from where I lived up north on my way to Salem. But we just weren't that involved. It was more I considered elderly people who were directing it and behind the scenes and up front, and I didn't feel that involved or that much of a part. It was more of my friends. That's what we did. That was what was expected. We'd show up for services, show up for the mode rallies once a month, but not invested so much as what I have been the last 30-some years, 20-some years.
Yeah. So talk about that. How did you get more invested and involved? What was that
I met
process?
my wife here at Mode Camp.
Well, that always helps.
Yeah, that does. I met her in 1987, and we started seeing each other and corresponding in 1989, and we were married in 1991. I was still living in East Central Illinois, in Vermilion County, near Danville, Illinois. I was teaching high school up there, and she was a nurse. And I'd made the decision that, and with Laura, that we wanted to make a move away from negative influences, because someday we planned to have children, and we didn't want to raise children in that environment. And because of our friends and connections in Salem, we were planning to head to Salem. And all that while, we kept coming to Mode Camp every summer, being a part, and eventually moved to Salem. And moving to Salem made a bigger difference because of the location and our friends, just being more and more involved with Mode Camp over the years.
Yeah. What's your favorite part about Mode Camp now?
I think I'd have to say the fellowship. I enjoyed that even from the very beginning, because we would get together as young people and discuss things that maybe other people weren't comfortable discussing. And we were just very open about it. And we talked about the direction our lives were heading, what direction as a group we wanted to go, what was important and what was valuable to us. And we don't get together like we used to 30-some years ago, but we're in a different place in life and we're more settled. But the fellowship, I love to see people. I love to talk to people. I've made it a goal of mine to learn from everybody I come in contact with, even if it's a baby to the oldest person that's ready to step from this world into the next life.
Yeah.
And even people that I don't agree with or I see negative things, it's always something to remind me of, to be careful not to be. And then those people that show me what it's like to live out Christian principles, it inspires me, and I think, oh, that's what it looks like to be like Christ in that way. And so it gives me ideas of what I can do and helps me to build in my character and to be transformed daily into His image.
Wow. Anything else that you want to say about Mode Camp, or anything else that you want to share before we close?
It's a great place. It was a great place to bring our children and to expose them to 10 days of a more intense, more focused study of Jesus and being around Christian people. Even so, we kept in mind that it wasn't heaven, and there was the potential for negative influences. And we don't know everybody that comes on the campground, because we're very gracious people. We're very open people to inviting others to come in, but you just never know. So on one part, we could relax to a greater degree than what we could in public places, but yet we were still vigilant.
Yeah. No, it's a good word. Well, thanks again, Bruce. I appreciate it, and it was a pleasure to talk with you tonight here on the mic.
It's great to talk with you and fellowship with you.
Certain things.
Yeah.
But we went to the ice company and got this huge block of ice and put in the back of the pickup truck and covered it with the tarp and drove it back to Mode Camp. And then people like my grandmother and different people working in the kitchen would take the ice picks, and you'd take chunks
Yeah.
and then put it in little refrigerators, little box wooden refrigerators that were outside of the kitchen at that time, propped up on blocks, I remember. And you would open that up and put your block of ice in there. And so at lunchtime or mealtime, they would take it, their ice pick, and even make it into smaller chunks to put in the pitchers.
Wow.
For the tea. And later Kool-Aid when I was a older person.
Wow.
That was probably the earliest memory.
Wow.
What makes it probably meaningful is there were people who were faithful. Even more than their testimony probably were their faithfulness. The Tuckers, the Harners, Pearl and Helen had a specific influence on my life because not only were they president of Mode Camp, but they were a part of my personal life growing up. Pearl was a leader, but he was a comedian. He was strong. And Helen was just as strong in her own way, but loved you deeply and prayed for you up until she was 90 when she passed. But the faithfulness of some of these people and their consistency made a huge impression. They just were unchanging.
Yeah.
They were just faithful.
But people who had experienced great trauma in their lives.
Yes.
You told me the story about...
Yeah, Pearl and Helen had one daughter.
Yeah.
She married and was pregnant at the time, maybe 2 to 3 months long, and she was helping her husband with painting a car and had an open wound cut and got lead poisoning from that paint at the time and died a really horrible death. And Pearl and Helen lost their only daughter at about 23, 24 years old. So.
And that was before they came here. Is that
no,
right? That
it was during this
time.
time. So their daughter was a part of this. Their daughter took my mother into Mode to a grocery store and bought her an ice cream cone. That's one of the memories that my mother had of their daughter. And she was a school teacher. She went to school as well to be a school teacher. Helen was a school teacher.
Well, this place obviously has a deep meaning for you, and I've heard you tell stories of this place, and you've kind of become the resident historian, the carrier of lots of those stories from the past. But what are those stories that you hope will be preserved for the next generation? What are the stories? Are there essential Mode stories that you feel like this next generation needs to hear?
I mean, there are funny stories. I mean, I can share, like I said, Pearl was very funny. He would raise money for chickens, to have chicken for Sunday dinner, and so he would have the crowd give $1 per chicken, and all the while Helen would come up in front of him, in front of the pulpit, and it was kind of like a little program they had worked out. He would totally ignore her, and she'd be in front of the podium, and he would be, getting money for chickens, and that was a cute little story. Or B.K. Beatty was here one time for us as a preacher, and B.K. was very funny as well. And he asked for salt, and Pearl threw salt to him in the dining hall, which caused my grandmother to go and, what are you doing, throwing salt? But anyhow, but those are the funny stories. There are stories that I haven't really talked about a lot because they're so unique. And Brother Tucker lived just in Mode, and he was a World War II vet. And he came And he was a new Christian, and he went up to the altar and he literally passed out on the floor. And I remember Pearl and Helen, certain people were concerned about his health, when actually Helen and Pearl said he is surrendering everything, because he had 2 little girls and a wife, and it was going to cost him a great deal to serve Jesus without them. And he just literally laid on the floor. And that was an experience I never, it was before my time, but that is a memory that has been, something has been passed down to me, that experience somebody had. But again, I don't want to elaborate on all the experiences, but another one was one time, they said in the 50s, they had, Brother Simpkins was sitting on the pulpit when he said, I just felt the overwhelming sense of his presence, and everyone was very quiet. And it was just a physical experience. Anyway, those are things I don't even know if you want to edit that out or not. But anyway.
No, yeah, those are part of the history, and I hear these stories of different people that really found God here.
Yes.
This was a place where lives have been transformed and whole family directions have been altered. Brother Ryder was telling me the story of his parents who came after him to this camp and really were completely transformed here at Mode Camp.
Yes.
As a result of it. And they've been church people, but they've never really been saved. And this camp for them was a turning point in their lives, but also in his life as well. And that's what I hear.
Yes, it really was for me. It was something that stayed the same. There was this steadiness that was convincing people who were steady, people who were faithful, who I believe lived it out in their daily life. It made a huge impression. I was probably 4 years old when I first went to the altar. And I just remember I could take you to the place as a child where I began that beginning of awareness of God, but had so much to learn.
Yeah.
And but this place, being an only child, provided friendships that have lasted, and they saved my life.
How so?
I probably had a false image of God. Well, I did. My view of God was skewed. You know, we all come from different paradigms and different situations and impressions, and my view of God was very much as a someone I could not trust, a father who I could not trust. He was looking out to reprimand me. I couldn't please him. And so your friends start helping you because of their life, because of their understanding of Scripture, and they're seeking for truth and who Jesus is really. Excited my mind, and it opened up, it literally destroyed the false image of God through their lives and through their understanding of Scripture and their friendship. And they were committed through thick and thin. They were, and it created an accountability, it created a community like I'm sure the disciples could enjoy with Jesus, So it's just you cannot put it into words. I don't think I could adequately put it into words of all the details and all the experiences. But they truly loved each other and loved me, and it made a big difference. Made all the difference.
That's powerful. Well, is there anything else that you'd want to share with us before we close? I appreciate you sharing so deeply.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting about. Well, let me go back to Helen Stevens. I saw her 2 weeks before she passed. She was in the wheelchair. Her hands were crippled, and I was trying to wash her face and wash her hands and cream her hands, and I felt like I was preparing her for her burial in a way. But she said, "Dorinda, do they still have mode camp?" And I said, "Moy, it's still going on." "Oh, thank the Lord," she said. "Thank the Lord." And I'm starting, I've lived life, and I'm getting really excited about what's to come ahead eternally. And I will work, I will do as long as I can, as much as I can. I'll be a faithful part. I want to be a part. But it's exciting about the generation coming behind. I trust. I completely trust them. I believe in them. And they have really stepped up this year. I've really noticed that. And it's such a blessing. It brings joy, just absolute joy. So.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the way in which you have spoken into so many of their lives. The Dorinda's group on Marco Polo is a testimony to that, and the way in which you and many others here too, but you in particular, have taken an interest in the younger generation and been a cheerleader for them and an encourager to them is inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
And appreciate your
I'm not
voice.
the intellect of this group. I'm just the farm girl that was raised about 7 miles from here. I depend on my intellectual, rational friends to perceive and depart wisdom. Mine is very simple. And I've learned from Dorinda's group. They've taught me. And I think I saw in myself someone who, well, I think it should look like this, or I think it should be this way. And then I realized it isn't about me. It isn't about my ideals. It isn't about what I think the future should look like or what it could, these ideals. But it really taught me to allow them and let go. And God has this, and He's working behind the scenes without me having to do a thing except be there.
Yeah.
So I've learned from it, and it's beautiful to watch it unfold.
It really is. And I think there's some great days ahead for Mode Camp.
Oh, I do too. I do too.
Well,
Okay.
Thanks.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
I enjoyed those conversations immensely, and I just want to say thank you to Bruce and to Matt and to Dorinda for sharing their time with me. It was just a pleasure to be able to speak with them about the memories of Mode. I know that for many of you, if you've not been to Mode Camp, those conversations and those people that they mentioned may not mean anything to you. But I think that everybody should have a Mode in their life. They should have some place that they keep coming back to and people that are speaking into their lives in a significant way. And if you don't have that, I encourage you to go looking for it. There are places where you and your family can and should be shaped in a multi-generational way. And I know it's been a huge influence in our lives. And I know that finding a place like that and being in that place will pay incredible dividends to you and to your family in the years to come. So just want to encourage you, if you don't have that in your life, it's something that you should really think about finding. For Gleaning and Gathering, God bless.